We've got an absolutely massive Director's Take blog that goes into the new changes coming to Season 8. They're addressing a lot of the balance concerns that I think will make the community a little bit more happy. But then in today's video, I want to open the discussion broadly to talk about balance in Overwatch 2. Can the community ever truly be happy? Is this even the right route to satisfy the concerns of the game? Or is balance really the friends we made along the way? Big video, we'll get into it right after this message. Today's video is sponsored by Manscaped.com. As a paying customer for over half a decade, I get super excited when Manscaped comes out with something new, and today we're looking at the Performance Package 5.0, and it features the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra. The Lawnmower 5.0 comes with next-gen dual skin-safe blade heads, now accompanied by an upgraded trimmer blade and interchangeable foil blade for enhanced performance. The upgraded trimmer blade has longer, wider, and rounded teeth that are tough on hair but light on skin. But the game changer is the foil blade, which is what will get you that very close shave so you can feel smooth. Easily pop it off and attach the foil blade to get down to skin level. And the 5.0 inherits all of the previous features as well: travel lock, USB-C charging Lion battery with a 3-level indicator light. Plus it's waterproof so you can use it in the shower. My personal favorite, the Weed Whacker 2.0, gets an upgrade as well. Skin safe technology makes it super easy to get rid of those nose and ear hairs that make you look like your granddad. Waterproof, cordless, USB-C charging, this one's great as well. Also packed in the performance package is the Crop Soother and Crop Preserver. The Crop Soother for comfort after you shave, thanks to it being enriched with coconut and shea seed butter. The Crop Preserver ball deodorant is the strongest counter pick against odor. It really secures the team comp down there. And the Performance Package 5.0 comes with 2 free gifts: the Boxers 2.0, these are incredibly comfortable, and the Shed 2.0 travel case. You gotta get the new Performance Package 5.0, either for yourself or for a friend for this holiday season. Head on over to manscaped.com and use our promo code Overwatch at checkout to get 20% off and free international shipping. That's manscaped.com and use promo code Overwatch. The first big global change is the ult charge retained when swapping heroes is reduced from 25 to 15%. They say they're lowering this value to see if it has any effect on swap rates, because the perception is that it's always an advantage to counter swap on dying. This is one of those changes that I think the community sort of forgets that a lot of people wanted in Overwatch 1. Granted, a very different game where it was actually pretty difficult to counterpick because counter comping was so important. Now with more power in individual characters, counter picks have dramatically more value anyway. And my question is, if it's going to be at 15%, why not just 0? Is it even a mechanic if it's that low? It was at 30 originally. I think because team comps are less stable, something I like about 5v5, counter picking is always somewhat doable anyway. So we just don't need this mechanic. I'm glad they tried it, but let's just get this to 0. What difference does it make at this point? Now they say in Season 9, which is the season after next, they've got some core mechanics to the game they're changing, along with the competitive overhaul, but not ready to talk about that. We'd kind of devalue Season 8, which we're about to play, I think, if we knew so many things were changing. Next up, tank balance. I think a lot of people would be surprised to know that Roadhog, after his rework, has a win rate somewhere around 54%, which, by the way, is insane. Now, granted, he is the type of hero you would probably try to swap off of when getting countered, but the perception of the community that I've heard everywhere is that he's bad. These numbers don't indicate that. In fact, if anything, he looks overpowered in his good matchups, or at least good. I think there's more things about that Roadhog rework that I didn't even have time to cover in my last video, more things that I've learned, more specificity, I'd say, that exists in the kit. There's a lot of matchups that I think people assume should still work, like Orisa, but since her stun doesn't take him out of breather really anymore, I don't know, he might even be favored somehow. Yeah, because she sort of just shoots at him and he heals it, then he burst damages her at some point. Kind of similar to Zarya if you're able to exploit her vulnerability windows. There's a lot of tanks that Hog kind of bullies, even ones that he used to struggle against, in my opinion. But again, complicated matchups. People don't like playing with him or as him sometimes. So I don't think people truly understand what he does or are interested in limit testing him the way that I'm trying to. But more importantly, the devs say that Mauga has a lot of answers to Roadhog anyway. So even though that win rate looks obnoxious, and I just said a bunch of positive things about Hog, well, turns out the tank that life steals and gains overhealth on critting one of the other biggest head hitboxes in the game, can sort of just infinitely life leech against you. So while you can see some windows where Hog could kill a Mauga, in a lot of them, Mauga just sort of is chilling and farming off of him like he does many of the tanks. But hey, that's just sort of the nature of the counterpick game we've got. Doomfist will now regenerate 75 health per second while in the air during his ultimate. That's quite a lot, especially if he's channeling it for the full duration. A clever change by the devs because they've noticed a lot of Doom players use the ult to go to a health pack anyway. This is intended to incentivize you to go in and actually hit somebody with it. But they're slightly increasing the cost of the ult in order to compensate for the buff, because now you'll get the guaranteed empowered punch and potentially like most of your life back. Another Ramattra buff, this time to his mage form, which they say is a little too easy to ignore. They're going to shift 100 of his health to armor and slightly increase the size and damage of his projectiles on his staff. Let's not forget that there was an era of this game where Ram was one of the best, if not the best character for a while. And one of the things that changed was that the backline got more healing stats and escapability. So Ram's got to really rack up a lot of stats before he feels that impact happen, as opposed to other tanks, which either have higher damage or just more reliable defense on themselves. Ram's kind of in the middle. The armor health really helps because in that mage form, ranged characters especially can really farm your hitbox, so you have to play very scared, and of course the staff was not very threatening at all. You're mostly farming for ult and finishing something someone else has damaged. So we'll see what that changes. Winston's getting a buff to Tesla Cannon. It will now ignore armor's damage reduction. So remember, there's a bunch of characters that aren't tanks that have natural armor as well. Not so many, but Bastion, for example, considered a hard counter to Winston. This is a small, minuscule buff to that matchup. Don't go too crazy now. But honestly, using the overpowered healing stats on Bastion is kind of the reason he can be so oppressive, because keep him topped up and the percentage of damage he takes goes down so much that he like never can die. So I don't know. Certainly will help focus fire on Bastion to make him more vulnerable. Not sure how I'm going to say it's a counter though. More importantly though is against other tanks. I'd say like Orisa is just an impenetrable fortress for Winston, though he does farm her team, has to ignore her. This will actually help him pressure out Reinhardt pre-fight even more, as he can bubble and shoot. Actually quite a big buff in that regard. Winston would be considered already favored against him on high ground maps, and I feel like there's mostly high ground maps in this game. I like complex interactions like this because I feel like it allows me to use my knowledge as a player to exploit something someone might not know, but in the same way that's kind of gimmicky, right? I don't know, Winston didn't need buffs. The game was just like really punishing against him. We'll see how that pans out. Sombra with her rework, which ironically was much better received. She's been sitting at a 45 to 48% win rate, which I'm not surprised by at all. She's pretty hard to execute. Even worse with her ultimate, which I think a lot of players just don't know how to use it, frankly, in its current form. In any case, they are massively reworking it. Now, the damage it zaps, the percentage of max health it drains, goes down a little bit from 30% to 25. Small nerf there. But they are going back to the ability lockout aspect of EMP. It was just 1.5 seconds, now it's 3 seconds. Ability lockout is super, super strong. Prior to this, I would advise, I'll take Samito's tip, got to, I don't know, rank 1 or something with Sombra. EMP in the last version, just going for solo kills, applying a hack with Virus, that's kind of all it's good for. For me, I kind of like it for its ability canceling, something that's channeling, or as a combo to quickly lower the defense of something for someone else to capitalize on with just a little bit of communication, or hopefully good timing. But now that timing window is just bigger, right? It lasting longer gives your team more chance to follow up. 3 seconds isn't forever. Let's remember, I believe the old hack lockout was like 6 seconds in Overwatch 1. Oh my God. 3 seconds is still short in a way, but 1.5 felt useless in a lot of cases unless you use it perfectly. Soldier 76 gets a bit of a nerf. Keep in mind, they buffed his healing station, which I thought was a little bit ridiculous at the time. And to compensate now, they're changing the cooldown on it from 15 to 18 seconds. So there's a larger window of opportunity by getting that cooldown out. Tracer's pulse pistol's damage is going back to 6. That was a value that I think they kind of considered to be radically overpowered at the launch of the game when it was flanker centric. They say it was because of a bug with the fall off, etc., but the thing was, before the supports got really strong, Tracer was insane even at this lower damage value. It wasn't until later, where now almost all the supports can defend themselves against a Tracer, that they feel comfortable to bring it back. This might look like a small numbers change, but Tracer is such a transformative hero to how anybody plays Overwatch, especially Overwatch 2 with one tank. Tracer buffs are always fairly risky for the game in the same way buffing Widow might be. Tracer and Widow can dominate a game from the DPS category unlike any other characters, at least when they're viable, right? The question is, with how many immortality abilities as well as high damage outputs just from the supports themselves, is this enough? Because I think most people agree that somehow Genji is the preferred flanker above Tracer, and it's not like anybody thinks Genji is oppressive on his own. It's just mostly like he has an ability that stops him from getting one shot, whereas Tracer can get dinked by a lot of the supports and pressured out entirely. I think Sombra's win rate is struggling for similar reasons. A powerful playstyle when you get it to work, but if they turn on you and can hit shots, it's like you're done. They do more damage than you. Good luck. On to support changes. Brig was one of the best performing support heroes since the last patch, and we're seeing feedback that she's becoming a must pick. Really? From what tier of play exactly? Not that I think she's bad, I just don't see her that often myself. I think she's insane, but she doesn't shoot at range. And she's one of those characters that is like such a niche skill set. It's not like so many players have mastered her anyway. So I don't know, strange commentary from them, but they're going to revert the damage on Whip Shot. They gave it a buff in the previous patch just because, you know, the support role needed a little help, wink, wink. They're also bringing back the damage potential of Baptiste and will be lowering his primary fire ammo from 45 to 36. So perhaps not the widespread support nerfs some people would want. I think the reality of the situation is Blizzard wants supports to be able to be DPS sometimes, to be able to play the game of Overwatch 2. So what an ammo change to Baptiste will do, and a fairly significant one at that, 3 bursts, force him to reload more and shoot less, meaning less damage, over the course of an entire match. Not less burst, not less dueling, just less shoot the tank forever and then also be able to duel the flanker. I think ammo count nerfs are like one of the unsung heroes. For example, I felt like the Lifeweaver nerfs, needing to reload as that hero matters so much, even if it's a quick reload. It can change it feeling like there's no window to advance versus windows of time. But Bap's gun does 2 things at once. So even if he runs out of aggressive ammo, he can still have uptime by healing with his healing ammo if he still has it. He always had significantly more offensive ammo to begin with, which I always thought was a little bit strange. But overall, the theme of the support category here is that they're not changing a long list of things that a lot of people say they have problems with. And I want to get into talking more about that as a concept with their balance philosophy overall. But let's finish off the director's take on the last few points they have here. This is about quick play. We'll summarize this. They ratcheted up the lever penalty in quick play. The abandonment rate in quick play matches has gone down considerably, but some players are upset about this if they're more casual or just wants to drop in and out of a match. But in truth, that kind of ruins the match for everybody else. They mention here, interestingly enough, that they have considered a 3rd main queue in the game in order to have different areas to serve people of different levels of seriousness. So what he's kind of implying there is maybe a queue that has the ranked rule set but isn't ranked, like a true unranked mode. They call it unranked now, but it's quick play, right? Like you don't play both sides. It isn't the ranked rule set without a rank. It's actually quick play. They should call it quick play, what we have now. So perhaps what one day they may consider is a sweatier unranked version with a harsher lever penalty, like a ranked light, and then a even more casual quick play with lowered penalties for leaving. I personally feel like this is trying to appease too many people at once. Splitting queues is always bad for matchmaking quality, but I also think they've kind of determined that matchmaking quality can't really be solved in this game regardless. If you've played Widow your whole career and you're decent at her, but in your quick play game you decide to learn Reaper for the first time, a character that takes finesse nowadays, well, good luck. You're probably going to underperform, despite it being a much easier hero on paper. And the matchmaker has no way of knowing you're going to do that, or the multitude of other variables that can modify your performance or what the matchmaker was even expecting of you to begin with. I want to broaden the discussion to talk about what Blizzard can even do to solve the balance kerfuffle of 5v5 Overwatch 2. I reached out to some content creator friends of mine, as well as polled you guys on Twitter for your responses. Let's collect a few of them here. I asked, is Overwatch 2 balanced? And if not, who are the problem heroes? Nathan says the supports that do everything, heal a lot and deal damage, kind of ruins the fun of the game. All right, let's put a pin in that one. That one, of course, echoed a lot in your guys' responses as well. SVB does say that he thinks balance is definitely better than last season, but feels like comp diff most matches again, just like Overwatch 1. Bad tank duos would kind of throw the game in Overwatch 1, but now it's bad supports. When people run like Moira Mercy, it's a guaranteed loss. Ooh, I definitely agree that supports have an outrageous power to dominate the team comp, but I think the whole team contributes nowadays. Team comp definitely really matters overall, to a degree that I think the community just doesn't even respect whatsoever. We've got like a TikTok Moira game sense version of rock, paper, scissors in the tank category. Meanwhile, which support you have is going to dramatically change how all of the matchups work, because you actually wouldn't counter the tank counter you assume should work if you have bad supports and they have good ones. The good supports can actually outweigh that matchup quite significantly, honestly. On one hand, I do definitely level with SVB in that these I don't have any tank interaction support picks are frustrating to play with, but I also think he and many players perhaps don't like or don't rate characters like Wrecking Ball and Roadhog, who are kind of designed to be able to have some impact when you don't have support really. But should the game kind of force you to pick those heroes to have any chance of winning at all? Yeedle had a nuanced take here. He says, snipers and immortality abilities contribute to a net negative of most people's enjoyment of the game, regardless of role, which is interesting because I don't even think they're considered that good right now. He just doesn't think they're good for the game, right? But does include Sojourn in there, and I think at the higher skill tiers definitely is the case. When you max her out, Sojourn is insane right now. Not so good for the average player though. He goes on to say Suzu and Immortality Field are too easy for much value they get. They need fundamental changes rather than cooldown changes. As in, the value of the usage of the ability needs to change is what he means, as opposed to just bigger windows of opportunity in between uses of the I win buttons. Or, you know, I can't die, perhaps. Doesn't win necessarily. And another hot take, Ana might also need one of those, which is a take I know I heard him expand on in a recent Group Up podcast talking about the overall balance of the game for all of the roles. They lessened the impact of sleep on tanks, which honestly, I'm really thankful for, because most of the time it feels like not such a big deal to get slept, but getting antied is incredibly punishing. If the enemy team all runs at you, when antied, you easily lose all your health in the time window of anti. So it's been suggested that perhaps you actually get anti-nade more often to make yourself more survivable and use it more often, but maybe it should have a reduced effectiveness either overall or against tanks. I mean, Sam made that suggestion at the start of Overwatch 2. And here's a really insightful take from Yeedle. So either changing Ana in that way to readjust the spikes of power, or tanks without matrix or a constant shield need better answers. Because as it is, the counter to tanks aren't tanks, but instead single heroes in other roles. Ah, see? The God Tank Top 500 player agrees with me. So you TikTok tank counter pick folk, you need to catch up. The actual counters are in the roles that get two heroes. To counter the enemy's tank, your tank can actually only do so much. On Twitter, there was a lot of great feedback. A lot of it's echoed in the things we've already said so far, but this one was a rather intriguing different take that I haven't heard before. Gabriel says, the game isn't balanced in the sense that I can pick whoever I want and always have a fun time. But I am glad to see that there ain't any clear Swiss Army knife picks. I want us to listen carefully to the words that are getting said here. There's an implicit assumption kind of baked in that Gabriel maybe is aware of as well, that can't ever be the case necessarily, but would the game be balanced if you just felt you could pick any hero in this game and it be fine? Because even in the most free version of the game, where it was tank and damage dominant at the start and supports had to play pristinely to survive, there were still some very punished characters. It was isolated in one role. So we could say a big percentage of players were having a great time, a lot of freedom. One role was kind of catching the slack. So now it's the other way, where that role can fight back and in fact dominate the strategy of the game and the skill expression output. Heal a ton, damage a ton, win duels, big ults. Supports do everything now. because the point I want to end on is kind of a powerful idea, trying to remind us all to be careful what we wish for, and the grass isn't always greener. So we need to be realistic about the effects of the things we're asking for, because a lot of the things in Overwatch 2 are the way they are because we asked for them. So let's fully think through these ideas and the ramifications of them before we just assume we'll all be happy in the new version. Because I'm going to warn you, that will never happen. Not everyone will be happy ever. The game's too complex and diverse of what people want. Because I think the truth that no one will admit, it sounds like, is that the game is balanced. It's very balanced. It's balanced around being a counter-pick-a-thon. It's not balanced so that you can freely play the hero that you pick. It's balanced based on the hero swap mechanic. So even some of the worst heroes in the tier lists, I'd say Reaper is among the worst in the game right now, still can hard screw a few characters, like uniquely so. What else would we expect from a game where the characters are superheroes? Like, what would we want to see? Because the truth is, the characters are so unique that the way their mechanics play out, they sort of have to counter something in order to be good. Unless we want the game to feel more like just a baseline shooter. But that's not the game we're playing. We're playing a hero shooter with supports in it. And I've seen two versions of the game that I actually like. I actually liked playing support in the survival horror era of the game, maybe even more than now, back when there was oppressive flanking or snipers. But the truth is, a whole section of the player base mostly hated that. So we can't have that. So instead now, we have like a punishing mix of everything in the game, but I don't think it's what the player base wanted either. And this is why I've said for such a long time in the game is that it's pointless to try to, quote, balance this game. It's as balanced now as it's ever going to be. As in, lots of heroes can get played and the win rates are somewhat stable on them. What else do we expect? And the hero roster just keeps growing. So the mutually exclusive playstyles are getting more and more severe, where we get more options for similar playstyles. What I mean is, if you wanted to go at the enemy's tank, one of the better options was Roadhog, let's say. Lots of damage. And maybe Orisa too. Less damage, but almost as much, and a lot of crowd control. But now we also have Mauga. Each one of these will have different matchups against the rest of the game as well. So the precision that we're allowed to counterpick the exact thing the enemy has gets more and more refined over time. Orisa has more defense and a suck ability, so she has more counterplay against anti-nade, but with her damage being lower, I'd say is weaker against a character like Baptiste, who can literally out-heal all of her damage. It's not high enough. Or, Lifeweaver completely counters your ult. Mauga and Hog have much better matchups against Lifeweaver. Hog can destroy the tree, and Mauga outlives it. The complexity of this game just keeps going up, and that actually makes me more interested, because I've always been a flex player. I think it's important to remember not to nerf the fun out of the game for the mass player base. I think it would be a mistake to mute supports down to the point of them being unfun to play or too difficult to execute. So I'm not sure I agree with the principle of higher uptime but less impact. Last I checked, Kiriko's win rate across the player base is not high. In fact, I believe it's in the negative. Baptiste, I'm sure, is not as popular as maybe he should be based upon the power he has perceived to be. But what people forget about him is that his effectiveness amplifies based on the positioning skill of his team. So while yes, if you're as skilled as Awkward, you can run it down main and out aim everybody. But I think if you're properly ranked and not one of the best players in the world, your team fighting off in bad positions that aren't relevant or you can't really support means the insane stats on your other abilities just don't get value. In fact, all of them. The more fortified your team positions, the amplified effect you have, which is what's kind of crazy about Bap, I guess. Like, that's why he's even a doubly more powerful character at higher tiers. Hold cover and you get to hold it much, much longer with a Bat behind you. But your team starts to spread out a little bit, plays too divey, off on irrelevant flanks. I mean, good luck having most of your abilities hit them. So now what? So much for the best character in the game, right? They made Alari harder to aim in the Season 7 patch, so a smaller percentage of players are dominating with her. Granted, I will admit, the support category is insane. It is. But I think it's just because they have the best passive right now. Sometimes when you're too good at this game, it really blinds you to how viable a B or C tier hero is for 99% of players. They start to get conditioned for what a top player should be able to do, because as you get higher in the ranks, the percentage of players that got there by skill expression heroes means that that skill tier of player likely can play any character in the roster more or less if it's required, especially aim dependent ones. So the logic they apply to the balance of the game is often dictated by that. Meanwhile, most of us can't aim out here, guys. Aiming in this game is really hard. These little hitboxes zipping around, double flipping everywhere. Metal rank players can't hit a Genji, but we want the game to be fun for everybody, right? So it's like, supports have to have outrageous abilities, to be honest. What else are they going to do? How do you make them interesting as picks? Because we certainly don't want a world where most players feel they need to pick Lucio Moira just to run away, which was the case at the launch of the game. Now into year 2 of Overwatch 2, I feel we're now getting out of that awkward teenage phase. It's time that we end the identity crisis and really define what this game is. Blizzard is trying to. I'm not sure if the community's listening though. It's a game about counterpicking, and the current all-pick format, guys, is just not gonna work for top tier play. So stop expecting it to. It never did to begin with. It wasn't good in Overwatch 1 either. But luckily, now that we are unshackled from the expectations of streamlining the product into a competitive scene in an AstroTurf league, I'm willing to bet that new competitive formats are going to emerge. There's a League of Legends tournament, which does have a normal draft format, but is trying a new one called Fearless Draft, which essentially means you can't use the same character from map to map in the series. Keynote on series there. Because when the format can do more heavy lifting, we can kind of acknowledge that balance is not the only way to fix this game, because balance can only do so much. Balance only changes how severe the counter picks are, not the concept that countering exists, because it always has. Heroes with different playstyles are bound to counter each other to some degree. And as Jeff Kaplan stated so many years ago, a player who perceives a 1% advantage will always go for that pick over the one that is slightly less favored. So that creates a balance impossibility, because the only way you make it perfect is if they're the same character. And as someone who has seen other shooter games that are less interesting and less fun kind of die away over the years, that really tried for FPS perfection where it is perfectly balanced, well, those games are kind of boring and lack texture and personality. A lot of the things that annoy you about Overwatch is what makes it unique. So when I hear so many people want to shave down most of the game, I'm like, what game do we think we're playing? But you can counter anything. You can counter one thing on the enemy team. You might be susceptible to other things that are good, but the game is asymmetrical enough that if you, for example, wanted to only go at what you believe is the strongest pick of their team, you can do that. You might not win. You may resent the game for being balanced that way, but you can do that. That's what it's designed to do. Overwatch 1, that wasn't possible because the team comps could be more perfect. Okay, that's my closing thoughts on balance. I'm really in a be careful what you wish for community, as I feel I'm losing control of the narrative here, getting more and more out of touch with the kids and fellow creators. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to leave it a like. You can support the channel by heading on over to manscaped.com and use our promo code Overwatch at checkout and picking up yourself your very own Performance Package 5.0 Ultra. If you've watched the video this long, that means you probably should subscribe so you check out our next one and click the bell icon to actually get notified when our videos come out. That's been it for me. I've been Frito for your Overwatch. I'll see you guys next time.